Hey guys, welcome back to Building a Family Business here on Builder Funnel Radio. I am joined as always with Wes and Brooks. Brooks, what's going on today?
Not much, just enjoying a beautiful day out in Seattle. We finally got into summer, so we're loving that.
One of your 5 good days out there?
There was actually 6, so don't cut me short. Yeah, but this will be one of them. And yeah, it might be 85 today. It's going to be sunny all day, so we consider that summer.
Yeah, treasure it.
We are.
Wes, how are you doing?
Doing great. Yeah, I was checking Brooks's weather this morning, and it looks really nice. I think it's going to be more like 10 days anyway.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that'd be awesome. I do remember that from being a kid in Seattle. You know, when the weather is nice in the summer, it's just like, oh, you just got this. You got to enjoy it because it's not going to last.
Yeah, we had a late start this year. It didn't even start getting nice till today's the 21st. You know, and it didn't start till like the 19th.
Well, what are you reading? You reading anything interesting these days, Brooks?
Actually, I read a pretty good article this week titled "Boosting National Service," and it's about the concept of, some kind of mission-oriented youth programs, get those elevated to the same status as military service. So getting an opportunity for youth to spend time in service, and just kind of about all the benefits of doing that. So it's a pretty good article.
So what were some of the benefits that they were highlighting in there?
Well, what they did is they had a commission that it's called the National Commission on Military, National, and Public Service, created by Congress at some point. And they actually took a tour, kind of similar to Alex de Tocqueville from France took a tour of America back in the late 1700s, and so they did the same thing, and they went across the country and had all these interviews and talked with people, and just came out of that saying, it'd be better if we would give people the opportunity to serve, and it would be help them transition out of into just maybe better opportunities, because one, they'd be exposed in more parts of America, be exposed to socioeconomic things that they might not be aware of, and actually help bring more community oriented, because people are seeing other people and meeting other people and learning to work with other people. And part of the challenge is right now, if you go into AmeriCorps or the Peace Corps, you might only make 15 grand for a year. Whereas if it was a military service, you'd actually get paid as if you were in the military. So that's part of the challenge. So if you go into like AmeriCorps or Peace Corps, part of the orientation is, well, here's how you apply for food stamps.
Right.
So, and there's a total oversubscription of people wanting to do it. I mean, they might only take 7,000 people in the Peace Corps in a year. So it's just the number is so underfunded by Congress that it's just you just can't get as many people into it. So that's the idea. Should we make something like that more, similar to the military?
Yeah, I think it's a great idea, because it's that whole concept of giving back and recognizing that you owe something to your country, that this is the place that you live, and it's a wonderful place and has many wonderful benefits, and which you partake in. And it's an opportunity to give back. Even if you get paid, you're still doing something that's going to help support the country, and you meet people. And I think that's an awesome idea.
Yeah, so it would be interesting if they could do it. Other countries do it. France has some different programs where they've done. Germany had gotten away from that. They're going to go back to it, I guess. But yeah, I think it would be. And there's some debate whether you make it mandatory like the draft, or you make it voluntary. A couple of higher ups, think, well, let's not make it mandatory, because then you've got people that don't really want to be there. So that would be that balance of, make versus a draft, which is, hey, everybody goes. But if everybody went, maybe that would be, everyone knows, okay, I'm going to go do that. And
yeah, I think that's a shared common experience, which I think is good as well. I think people that have been in the military they always have that common bond of, hey, we're in the, what branch were you in? We're in the
Always that
military
question,
together, all those types of things. And so since I'm obviously too old to participate in that, I'm all for the mandatory national service.
Yeah. Did they have any sort of timeline on what they were, looking at in terms of getting something?
What they're trying to do is just increase funding. The problem is funding. So they're saying if we could just get Congress, I think one of the numbers they said is, hey, Congress spent $3.2 trillion on education for STEM and all, and they spent $3 million on public service. So the disparity in the numbers. So they just are trying to come back to Congress and say, you know what, we should put more money towards this, which means it's going to have to come from somewhere else. And one of the points of the article is now after all the funding for the pandemic, it's just going to be more challenging to try to get money to it. But,
Sure.
So it's more about funding, and probably no one really disagreed that it wasn't some kind of good idea to do that. But where are they going to pull the money from?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it sounds like too, even if they didn't go the mandatory route, I mean, there's, like you said, people that would want to do something like that. And so you'd increase the participation by probably quite a bit, but they
increase funding. Yeah, they can increase participation on the ball until they said, we're fully subscribed on the volunteers. We put every volunteer into a position, see how that worked for 5 or 10 years. And then you could say, gee, it's really successful. We should make it mandatory or just increase the funding. I can't imagine how many people you get. You probably get 2 or 3 million people a year that would do it.
Yeah, it's interesting, Wes, you mentioned kind of that shared experience, and a lot of people that go into the military have that. And I mean, I just know I had that with sports, and especially with football was kind of a unique one in that I've played different sports, but that one, you're going through something pretty tough, and pretty demanding physically. And that bond that you create going through something like that together, and if it's got a challenging component to it, then that typically forges that bond a little bit stronger. I feel like something like this, if we had some more shared experiences, maybe that would help minimize a lot of the the fighting that internal fighting that's going on now, and just because you find that common ground, you do something together. I think that's an interesting perspective on how that would maybe add different layers of benefits that they weren't originally thinking about.
Yeah, and they did reference that, and that commonality of, hey, we've done something similar, and just meeting other people from different parts of the world and the country, parts of the country.
Yeah, different walks of life, different regions, and I think also let's say it was the sort of thing where you're 18 or 19 when you do that, and a lot of kids, I would say, are not interested in going to college at that point, even though their parents might be pushing them very hard to go to college. And so might be a good transitional experience for people, for younger adults to go through that and do that for a year or 2 years. And then they can decide, hey, do I want to go to college? Do I want to go to a trade school? What I want to do, but it might open up their eyes to some different possibilities and give them a little more time to mature. And as you guys said, meet some other people from different parts of the country.
And I mean, people are living so much longer today that if you delayed college, by a little bit, and then you delayed your career start, you just got a lot of runway in front of you that, that added experience might be more beneficial, even if it delays a couple of other things that, are being typically pushed as the immediate next step.
And probably a conversation from some other time, maybe not this podcast, but college isn't really for everybody. And so I think we need to rethink the educational system as well. So that's a whole other topic.
Well, we could probably handle that in 45 minutes.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Should we just start there? Yeah.
Funding included, yeah.
Yeah. So what we were going to talk about today, which I think we will move on to, was we were kind of thinking about this the other day, which is within the family business environment, at least you see this a lot in construction. I feel like you got the founder, original owner, is, dad, he starts the business. He's maybe been in the business 20 plus years, and then maybe the son or daughter starts coming into the business, and they start to learn. And, the hope is that there will be this transition. And I think oftentimes the business can outgrow either one of those positions. Either the child doesn't catch up in knowledge or skill, or maybe they just don't have it, or maybe they even wanted to do something else, and so the effort and energy isn't there because they just kind of got planted there. Or the original founder maybe isn't leveling up their skill in growing the business fast enough, or just delegating or training or passing on some of those skills. But I guess I'm curious just to get your guys' overall take on this concept. Do you think that happens often? And are there some easy ways to tackle that? Like quick wins, just get right to it. I don't know, Brooks, what do you think about this concept? I guess
I think it's a challenging concept, and I think it's pretty, it's very common. It's probably one of the biggest things that comes up, if you do any research around family businesses and transitioning family businesses. It's this transition from generation to generation, and it can go, like you said, Spencer, the founder to the next generation, but it can go from the second generation to the third generation. It's that handing off of the baton that if you ever ran track and you're in a relay race, that transition period where you're in this spot on the track and you have to hand off the baton from the runner to the next runner, and you drop the baton, you're out. And I think there's only, what did they say? I think it's like 13% of the family businesses make it from second to third generation, and 60% make it from first to second. And, the baton gets dropped all the time. So it's a huge, huge topic for sure.
Well, I think to your point about that, Brooks, if you think about the odds, so what are the two things to make a successful transition, from one generation to the next generation, whether it's first to second or second to third? The generation it's being transferred to has to have two things. They have to have the skills to be successful, and they have to have the interest.
Desire.
So they could, the desire. So they could easily have one of those and not the other, or neither. And the pool that you're drawing from as a business owner is pretty small because it's your progeny. So, that could be a little or a lot. Our grandmother came from a family of 12 kids. And so, but that's probably the maximum you're ever going to see, most likely in a family. And certainly with declining birth rates, pretty small families nowadays. You have folks who are having one or two kids. So it might be a nephew or a niece or some other family member. But I think skills and interest, and if you can't get past those two, you're not going to make it. So I feel like you need to take that step back and once again, let's say you are the founder, or even maybe you're second generation, but you're operating. You really have to look at what your goals are. And I think we've talked about this before on the podcast, is determining what your goals are for the business. And is the goal are you trying to develop a world-class business? And that's really what you're trying to do. You're more interested in the business, or are you more interested in the family aspect of it, which is I'm trying to provide an opportunity and a place and, for our family to flourish and to do well. Or am I really interested in this business because the technical aspects of it, I just really like, building and remodeling, and that's the interest part. So you got to figure out what your goals are, Brooks.
Well, and I think that as you transition from generation to generation, if each generation has their opportunity to put their print on the business, and so it could be that it organically just first generation went to second generation because it just happened that way. And a lot of times I think it's just especially if you just go back in time 70, 80, 100 years. And that would have been a more traditional coming out of the trades that, a parent would train most often the son to take over the family trade or the business. And so you see some of that without really anything about, oh, am I going to have a world-class business? Am I going to, and now we have because in America, we have such a vibrant economy and you have a lot of opportunities. You have an opportunity to have a discussion about, oh, am I interested in the business or am I interested in just the family? Because we're most likely it's not necessarily totally about survival. And
Right. Yeah.
so now we have the luxury of having that discussion of, well, is it a world-class business? Don't really care if there's any family in it, or is it family first, hope the business works out? And I think they go together in parallel. So you have to go back and forth. So you have to put on your business owner hat, take that off, put on your family, whether it's your parent, your second generation or third generation, and look back a little bit and say, well, was it my great grandfather? Did he really lay down some kind of mandate or goal or vision for the business? Or is it, no, he just was able to create something and it got passed? And did that next generation, did they lay down a man? Because you need to, I think, to respect that and go back and say, well, what was their goal if they did state it? And then if they didn't, then it's up to that generation, whoever's in control to, set the stage for those next generations, regardless kind of what happened. Whoever's in control is the person who is going to set that stage either very well or not very well. And I think it goes to your original question, Spencer, about, the founder and this trend in this transition.
Yeah. And one of the big things that I heard you guys mention is obviously the interest piece. So let's assume there's interest, in the next generation getting involved, transitioning. Let's kind of dig into that skill piece. I guess there's certain situations where, I'm a big believer in personal growth. I think everyone can improve, but there's probably some situations where maybe the skills that are needed, it's either more challenging to develop or they're not the natural strengths of the next generation, or the skills that the original founder had are just different from the next generation. So maybe that person is going to be great in some role within the business and really excel. But I guess, what are some things to think about with that kind of piece of it, which is the skill piece of it, because that there are just different personality types and different skill sets needed in every position. And that founder role sometimes is even a different skill than taking the skill that's needed to take it to the next level once it's been built off the ground. So I think there's just a lot of variables there. I guess, Wes, how do you think about some of those things? If somebody's listening to this and they're kind of in the middle of a transition, or they can see a transition on the horizon.
I think to go back to Brooks's point about in the past, the skill part of it was actually the trade.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a really good cobbler, or I'm a really good, plumber, and I pass those skills down to the next generation. So that's the skill set that you're talking about. But I think today, the skills that are required you do have to have knowledge. Depends on how big the business is, of course. But you have to understand what the business is, the technical aspects of it, so you can manage it. But then there's that whole other layer of skills, which are around the business management of the business. You got to have some understanding about accounting. You have to be able to read your balance sheet and your profit and loss statement, and need to be able to review contracts. And you got to understand, how do I manage people if I have people that work for me? So that's a whole nother layer of skills that need to be developed. And you can have pretty disastrous results if you don't think about that for the next generation. I had a friend who had a business here in town, and he had a son who he very desperately wanted to pass this business down to, and the son didn't finish high school. And so the son had various jobs within the company, and really but he just never came up to speed. He really wasn't the caliber in terms of managing a business. And so um, when his dad passed on rather suddenly, he had this business to run. And it unfortunately was kind of at the same time we had a big downturn too. So that business didn't last long. You know, they were quickly out of business, and because the skills were never developed on how to run the business and understand that part of it. I think the son had a decent understanding of the technical side of it, but never came up to speed on the business side of it. So I think as the person who is in charge, as Brooks was talking about, whoever's in charge, their responsibility is to do that vetting and make sure that if the son or daughter has expressed interest, or the nephew or niece, that they are assessing and putting them through a way to develop their skills, and visiting and checking back on that pretty regularly. And if they don't, then they're going to have a little bit of a disaster on their hands, most likely at some point. It could work out well, but
the chance that it worked
but,
out.
but chances are low. So most of these things don't just happen.
I think that's the critical thing, is they don't just happen. It's not like, you just don't end up in business and have a successful business. That just doesn't happen. It comes about because of hard work and focus and intention, being intentional about what we're doing. I mean, we're in business for a reason, whether it's, build, you're remodeling or building or whatever reason you're in business. And then you have the opportunity to have family work with you. So go back to West's point, whoever's in charge, I really believe has an implicit responsibility to direct traffic and figure out, what the direction of that business is. You might have gotten a mandate from previous generations, or maybe not, but it's up to you. And it depends on, everyone has a different feeling about responsibility to future generations whether it's in their family or, in the country. So if you, as a business owner, and you're the founder, or you're the one who's in charge, it's that, how much of a responsibility do you feel to pass this business on to the next generation, or pass something on? And you may decide, what, I'm not really interested in that, and this business is just here for my benefit, and when I'm done, then I'm going to wrap it up. And we've talked about that previously. And so I think goes back to those original questions about what do you want to have happen with your business, and you get to that.
Yeah. So the communication piece is pretty important. You've got to be communicating frequently and having fairly in-depth conversations about it. I think it is a little bit of a powder keg, in the sense that if you do have a son or a daughter that is interested in the business, and they are not coming up to speed, and they don't have, everyone's not suited for every single job, right? And sometimes, even if there's an interest can help a lot to overcome a lot of things. But even with that, it may be the situation where you can see that they're not the right person to take the business forward. And so that's a super hard conversation, right? If it's a child, a grown child, you're going, hey, I don't think you can handle this. Gee, how devastating is that? So I think you got to tread pretty carefully as you enter this part of the arena, where you're going, man, I'm going to try to bring my kid in, and they're going to run this business. It's all going to be great. Well, it might not be great. And so what are you going to do if it's not great? So know that and think about that before you get into that situation, because you may have to have a hard conversation, and that could be more damaging to the family and the family relationship than having that child never enter into the business.
Yeah, it kind of feels like, it feels like that could happen often, just odds are good that could happen. But then I think there's the other side of the coin too, where maybe you have the original founder, they get something off the ground, they get it to a certain level. Now the skills required from getting from there to the next level are different. Whereas the person coming in, maybe they're more suited for that. And then you maybe get into a spot where they've got the interest, the drive, the energy, and they're going to take it up a notch. But maybe the founder, it seems like maybe their skill level at that point needs to be delegation or letting go, or other things. And I feel like it seems like it just takes a lot of self-awareness on both sides, but definitely the founder, or whoever's trying to transition it, to have kind of that awareness of what are my skills, where am I lacking. Because I think about that a lot here at Builder Funnel. I'm going, well, gosh, if I'm not continuing to level up and improve and grow, eventually things will stall out and I won't have the skills to get us to the next level. And so I think there is an element of that going on both sides, the founder and the person incoming. But I'm assuming it probably happens more often that maybe the person coming in maybe doesn't have that skill, because like you said, it's not necessarily the skills of the trade at that point, it's the business skills and evolution of technology and different things that you have to pick up that maybe you didn't have to learn when you first started the business. So
yeah, I think if the usually the second generation, they are focused more on the business aspects and growing it, and maybe they've had more business training, maybe they've had some schooling or whatever, but the founder had that original vision and bootstrapped it up off the ground and got it going. And now the second generation wants to grow it further. So I think this is where, like you said, communication is important. A lot of self-awareness is important if they have it. But to me, it's this transitional time needs to be fairly short. So, and it could be measured. So between first generation, second generation, or second to third, or whatever. But these transfers, I think you need to look at trying to do something that's shorter than longer, because you need to transfer that control, and that maybe it's a change of direction in the company. I mean, nothing is static, nothing stays the same. So if you have a 20-year plan for transitioning this business, just personal opinion, way too long, right? So 5 years or less in my book, in terms of the actual transfer of control, it should be fairly short. Now, it doesn't mean that someone wouldn't come in and work and go, okay, I'm invested in this business as a kid. I see where I want it to go. But then there has to be some firm timelines around, okay, great. Well, now we're going to transition ownership. You're going to buy it, or whatever that transfer is, but it has to happen on a fairly short term, because otherwise in that murky gray area of transfer of control, that's where a lot of, I think, conflict can occur between the generations, where the first generation has their view, second generation has their view, and either one could be right, but only one can be in control. And that's what has to happen. So just, I think these long-term buyouts tend not to work out too well.
Well, and I think part of the challenge is around money, because you can say, well, your example, Spencer, is, hey, the founder's been doing it for 20 years. So maybe he's 40. Well, he's not ready to retire yet, unless the business has been super phenomenal. So, and, in America, people work till they're 65. So if someone's 40, they're not going to tap out till 65 and say, okay, now I'm done working. And yet an adult child might be ready to come into the business at 25 or something. So now the founder's 45. So are they going to be ready to retire and hand over the reins at 50? Most likely not, just because they're not ready to retire and they're not financially capable to retire. So then the money becomes an issue, and then you're trying to transition, like Wes said, you do this short transition of control to the next generation. And now the next generation is in charge of the financial well-being of the first generation.
And I think that's an excellent point, Brooks, because, and if you think about it, our lifespans are increasingly long, here in America. So Social Security is set up. Hey, it's set at 65 for a reason. You're supposed to die by the time you're 65 or a little bit before. Most people are hitting their stride when they're 60 and 65 today, if you look at that. And so I think the first thing a business owner should do in looking at the transition is go, well, what's the age differential between me and the next generation? To Brooks's point.
Yeah.
So, is it a 20-year difference or a 40-year difference? How close am I to retirement?
Yeah.
How much money do I need to do that? How quickly could I transfer this? Because we've all heard the horror stories of mom or dad still come to the office. It's usually dad, at 95, the son is 75, the daughter is 75. They've been collecting Social Security for 10 years. And
we think mom or dad will transfer power, at some point, and you're going, better chance that you're probably going to die before that happens than, as the adult child.
And so as the adult child, you've got to look at that too. If that offer is being made to you, hey, come into the business, learn the business, transition. So you have to ask yourself, what are the realistic odds that this is going to happen? And I think it's important, if you are that next generation and you're working the business now and your mom or dad are running it, look at it and go, what are the odds that this is going to happen? And be brutally honest with yourself about it based on your conversations. Maybe have some conversations. Based on how those conversations go, you need to be willing to walk away. Because if you're getting the feeling it's not going to happen, you can waste your prime, 20 years of prime development time for yourself. So I think when we're young, we think we have all this time in front of us. But, when you get to 60, 65, you look back and go, well, that went pretty fast. And so you need to be aware of that as you look forward as a young person. Go, well, I'm 25, I got till 50 or so, I have to really push it hard and develop myself in some space. Can I do it with mom or dad in the business? Are they going to transition it out and allow me to grow or not? If they're not,
it seems like the time perspective might be one of the bigger factors that why it doesn't transition, after 3 generations.
Yeah, it's a kind of this structural thing that we don't think about, and it's going to be different for every family business, which is physically, what are the age differences between the generations? Once you get past the skills interest part of it, but what are the age differences? What are the money issues in terms of what people need to live on, and that transfer of power and authority?
I mean, in our business with Heather and I and Todd and Julie, we were very clear, hey, next generation's not going to come into this business because that's not something, we don't think that business, well, number one, we didn't think that business could support 6 more people. Then it would be supporting 10 people, or, 8 families. And we're just like, there's just not, the business we do not have the economic capacity to make the business that big. So we just chose not to provide that opportunity. And Todd and I didn't want to work that long. So, because we, instead of being, retired now, we would have had to retire in our mid 60s to make that next big push. So we did some other, created some other opportunities, but that wasn't, through the business, wasn't that going to be the opportunity for those kids.
That makes sense. Yeah. And I know that was one of the things you mentioned earlier, was just deciding, is this something that I want to pass down, and if so, why or not? And then, once you've made that decision, if you do want to pass it down, then you've got to flip the script and go, is there interest, is there skills, and kind of work your way through it. Wes, I guess, how did you think about that piece of it, when you were thinking about your business?
Well, I think there's, as I was thinking about our topic today, I've run into this a couple of different times, and certainly, when I was involved in the building business, and Brooks and Todd and I had all received some stock as compensation for at some point in time, and And at that point, I'm thinking, well, okay, great. Here's some stock, a little bit of stock in the company. Okay, hey, this is interesting. I really would like to pursue this and go forward and purchase more stock and eventually work my way up to an ownership, a majority ownership position, or, with Brooks and Todd or whatever. And, through conversations with our father, those conversations really didn't go anywhere in the sense of buying more stock. It's like, hey, I'm interested in buying more stock. Well, what's the rush? Why, I'm not interested. And I think probably because of the age differential, right? Okay. So at that point, our dad was pretty young, and we came into the business quite young. And so he's gone, man, I've got a lot of roadway in front of me to work, and I've got a lot of things I want to do. And, he hadn't really thought about probably transitioning control of the business. So it didn't take me long to figure that out. Well, a couple of years. I'm not that bright, but
it did. I mean, it took 14 years before you finally said.
Well, that's true. Right. Yeah. So I've been in the business for 14 years. Yeah. 14 years. And at that point, another opportunity came along to buy another business, and said, well, I don't think that this will ever transition and happen. So I chose to leave. And, of course, I transitioned over to another family business, so I'm an expert at family businesses, I guess, to purchase that business. And in that
regular guru.
Yeah, regular guru, just do what I say, not what I do. So, and in that case, because of my experience, first time around, I was much more aggressive about purchasing that second business and making sure that transfer of control and ownership came over as quickly as I could leverage up and make those purchases of stock. But it was interesting that my father-in-law had the same initial response, which when I went to buy more stock was, well, what's the hurry? And at that time, he was probably 60 or 62 or something at that time. And he loved this business, he loved the business, and same sort of thing, typical founder who's built something up from nothing, and is very proud of it. It's a very good business. So I had to kind of lean in kind of hard to make that transition happen. And to his credit, he looked at it and said, okay, well, this does have to happen, and I will get out of the way. And he did. He's just like, okay, and we'll do the deal and finish it up. And that's how it went. And so it was quite quick. Relatively speaking, I think that the time frame would have been probably, well, when I say quite quick, I think it was probably 6 years or something before we gained majority interest and control. But that seemed really quick compared to my prior experience, I guess. So anyway, that's my point. So it's just that it has to happen fairly quickly in order to keep the next generation or whoever the potential buyers interested. They want to do their own thing. They want to make that company into their own image in a way, and so they need to do that. But as the transferring generation, if you don't have your exit strategy or an exit plan or a way to support yourself worked out, then it's going to be a little problematic.
I think you have to be honest, and that it goes back to communication we've talked about before. Communication. And if you make that commitment to an adult child to say, hey, come work in the business, have spent some time thinking about how you play that out, those scenarios out. And even if you already have an adult child working in the business, take a couple days and say, okay, well, how do I see this streaming out? And then wherever you are, have the right conversations, have the conversations about, hey, well, where do we go from here? Because you may have misled an adult child and they're working for you and they're in year 5 and you still have another 25 years to go and you're not interested in transitioning, or you're not financially able to make that transition. Say, you know what, I was wrong. I can't bring you, we can't do more. This just going to be enough for me. And just be honest about that. I mean, to follow with Wes's experience, I spent, I think it was 17 years in the business working for our father, and similar thing. There wasn't an interest in a transfer of ownership. So that's when Todd and I exited and started our own company. But that was after, so we bought a small portion of the company and just moved on, because there wasn't going to be a transition. So that's that. So I think it's the honesty and on both sides, whether it's the first generation, the founder, and the next generation, but everybody just being honest about what they're trying to do, and then trying to find a harmonious solution. Because probably a lot of times it's going to be, well, we're going to go our separate ways because the business is not economically viable or big enough to support this many people, or people don't want to take the risk to make it that big. So there's things to think about.
Yeah, I like that word intention, because I feel like a lot of people just move through different things in their lives without you kind of get into it, and then you just kind of start coasting along, and then all of a sudden, to your earlier point, Wes, time, it seems like you've got a lot of time, but things move quickly, and suddenly 5 years go by or 10 years go by, and oh, I guess maybe now I should think about this, and you realize then that's the time you're having those discussions. So it seems like if everyone goes into it with some intention, some self-awareness, and just go, okay, what is everyone hoping to do? And maybe you don't have all the answers, but you're at least opening up that discussion and keeping it as kind of running in the background, so that you're at least progressing towards something, even if it's just, oh, I want to work in the business to learn some skills and I'm interested, and then you revisit it after some time. But it seems like those few things, the awareness, the intention, and the communication, will get you to at least a point of decision. Anything you feel like we missed here, just leaning back on some of your prior experiences?
I think I was thinking about we were just talking about how the transition time should be relatively short, to be defined by you and your particular situation, of course. But with that goal in mind of making it to the next generation. And I think one reason for that is because businesses do change, the market does change, and many times the founder or whatever generation is in control is not seeing the tea leaves, reading the tea leaves correctly about what's going to happen in the future, and that next generation that's coming in, that management that's taking over. Many times they do see that. And so that can be a point of conflict. And we're all that way because, now at age 60 for myself, I am not as wrapped into what's going on the social media side and, different ways that you would approach your marketing. What are some different, what are products that are out there that are going to be coming online? Unless you're really heavily involved in that, you're going to miss out on some of those trends. And so if you are locked into the way you've been always doing things, then that business is probably going to fail, because all businesses have to transition in some way. Now, I'd say with remodeling and home building, there's a lot of things that just aren't going to change a whole bunch. It is more of an incremental change. It's not these huge industry changes that come in and sweep out old businesses and bring in brand new businesses. But still, there are changes that happen. And usually that next generation is more set to deal with those things.
I think it's willingness to invest in the future, because as you get towards the end of your career, you're like, well, let's just keep putting the money here in the bank.
Let's ride this one out,
That's right. Yeah, let's not spend a ton of money investing in new software or new computer systems or these, whatever is the thing that you need to spend the monon. You're like, well, you know what? I'm kind of getting near the end here. Let's just keep piling it up. And
the new generation is going, let's buy the new software. Let's work on our CRM, and the passing generation is going, well, I really want to buy a vacation place. And
let's coast to the finish line here.
Let's coast to the finish line.
The uses for cash certainly change.
At your question, Spencer, about, what are some of the stories, in looking back, I think the more you can do to get outside help, I just a plug for the, family business consulting group, I read a lot of their stuff. They're a great, they just have tons of great content. I've never worked with them, just absorb all their content, and so whoever you decide to work with, but it's somebody that has an expertise in family business, not just business consulting, but because the family dynamic is, business is hard enough. Add the family dynamic, it just gets even more challenging. So it's getting outside help, and that's something we never did enough of.
Right.
Still
yeah, a dispassionate, disinterested person who can talk people through that. So, and they can have the hard conversations with both sides, where they see the weaknesses are, and lots of times we just don't see what we should be doing, and it's easy enough. We're all human.
Well, and we're busy trying to make a living.
Sure.
Like, hey, I'm just trying to keep this business afloat.
Right, and this is a whole nother job.
It's a whole nother job. It really is.
Yeah, and you see when people go to sell their businesses, the same sort of thing. All of a sudden, that job just doubled because that's a whole nother thing just to sell a business. So just transitioning it is tough enough.
Yeah, it's a kind of interesting that just made me think. Sometimes that next generation, and maybe it doesn't happen in the building business as often, or the remodeling business, but they have that, I guess, energy, or they can see like the new trend or the new technology, and they can kind of act as that extra role, so you said, oh, you kind of double up on your work when you transition, and sometimes you kind of need that person regardless, because they may be the one that can kind of do the grunt work of like digging into the new technology or the new products or the new process or the new systems or whatever it is, because the founder or the person in control is just keeping the wheels moving and doing all that. And I know, Wes, when you and I were lifting Builder Funnel off the ground as a division of the direct mail company, I remember, I spent a lot of time coming in and talking to you, but I know you were kind of leaning on me to dig into the weeds on that, but you saw the vision of, I need to transform this company, but then you kind of needed, I don't know, another role, or maybe you didn't, but that's
I think that's a good description. I think it worked well because I think first off, I didn't know anything about this new business, but I trusted that you could figure that out and develop that and come up with actually what is the product, what are we doing, what's the service offering. And so I just looked at my role as to be a safety net and an incubator, and relieve you from having to think about all the other parts of a business, which are really just a drag on the creative process of coming up with the actual business product and offering. So, the accounting and paying the bills and doing all that kind of stuff. So I think that worked pretty well. So I could provide that support network, which I was very familiar with, and we had a business to provide all that. And then you could work on the new product offering and the new business offering.
Yeah, I think just that brain space sometimes is the big piece of it.
Right.
So if you, and so I could lean on you for those systems, and then all of your past business experience, but then come in with the fresh set of eyes, and so same point that you were making, Brooks, just getting that outside perspective, because I know I grew up just going, I'm not really interested in direct mail, but then I had this different perspective, and that was where the interest was. But even if you're both interested in the transition, just getting some outside vision on what's happening, or what does this business actually look like? Where is it actually strong? Where is it weak? Sometimes you're blind to those when you're in it. Any final thoughts on this topic, guys, or did we cover it?
I would communicate, be intentional.
Yeah. Timing. I think timing look seriously at that. And if you're the transferring generation, have some humility and know what you don't know, and be willing to accept what the new generation is bringing to the table.
Cool. Well, good advice, and thanks guys for joining me, and thank you as always to everybody that's listening. We appreciate your support, and if you ever have ideas for the show, things you want us to dig into, shoot us a quick email over at radio@builderfunnel.com, and we will see you next week here on Building a Family Business on Builder Funnel Radio.